Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you, many kings and prophets have desired to see what you see, and have not seen it. To hear what you hear, and have not heard it. I thank you, Father, for hiding these things from the learned and the wise, and revealing them to the innocent and the simple.
Tonight, nearly 30 million Americans are under watches and warnings for severe weather, including flash floods and tornadoes in the south. Memphis was pummeled with hail today, part of the same system that spawned a tornado last night in Oklahoma.
Driving rain in Warner Robins, Georgia, left some streets looking more like high seas.
I've never gone through that before.
Residents like 81-year-old Shirley Polini were making breakfast when trees started cracking and falling on houses.
You can replace a house, but you cannot replace a person.
According to the National Weather Service, winds topped 80 miles per hour this morning, powerful enough to flip this 18-wheeler. A pair of tornadoes whipped up in other parts of Georgia, leaving a trail of torn-off rooftops and twisted debris. In Louisiana, heavy rain caused flooding ankle-deep in parts of New Orleans.
There it is.
Last night, there were reports that 5 tornadoes had swept across Indiana, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi.
It's getting bigger.
After a twister touchdown in Lowndes County, Mississippi, emergency workers were forced to respond by foot, weaving around toppled power lines and trees blocking roads. 50 homes near New Hope were damaged, but no one was hurt. Randy and Jenny Lawrence feel guilty because 2 of their trees landed on their neighbor's house.
They are such wonderful people, and I would have given anything for these trees to have fallen on our house instead of theirs.
Students clash with police in Paris for the second time this month, as France turned out for the biggest demonstration yet against sweeping labour reforms. Air and rail services were cut by up to half, while even electricity output dropped as workers united with students against the government.
We're here to fight for our rights. Otherwise, we will lose everything. For us who are quite old, it's okay. But the worst is for our children and grandchildren. They'll be left with nothing.
A powerful blast has rocked the southeastern Turkish city of Diyarbakir, wounding 14 people, more than half of them Turkish forces. Local media say the blast hit a police vehicle near a bus station in the mainly Kurdish-dominated city. Turkey's southeast has suffered the worst violence in 2 decades since a ceasefire between Ankara and the Kurdistan Workers' Party collapsed last July. The violence has left thousands of militants and several hundred Turkish forces and civilians dead since then.
Drought is lingering in Southeast Asia. Now, farmers are struggling in Thailand as reduced water for irrigation has hurt agriculture, particularly rice cultivation. With less rain expected this year because of El Nino, the government has implemented drought mitigation measures. They call on farmers to stop irrigating paddy fields to save underground water and encourage them to grow other plants such as potatoes, mushrooms, and corns, which use less water. And it's not only a local problem, while the drought is expected to impact the exports of sugar from Thailand this year.
Now, clashes between Azerbaijan and Armenia over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region continued on Sunday, despite Azerbaijan's announcement of a unilateral ceasefire. And the defense ministries of both Baku and Yerevan accused each other of shelling using heavy weaponry, and the fighting over the landlocked region, which began Saturday night, has left at least 30 soldiers on both sides killed and several civilians wounded. Russia, the US and UN have appealed to the two sides to show restraint.
Armenian officials say Azerbaijan continues shelling towns in the region. They warned that Armenian-backed forces will use combat aircraft in case of a new large-scale attack by Azeri troops. Armenia's president, Serge Sarkisian, has warned that conflict could turn into an all-out war.
An Arctic blast is being felt along the East Coast. 2 people died in Massachusetts when a tree fell on their car. The visibility over Boston Harbor was also near zero for much of the morning. On social media, signs of spring looked more like winter, with tulips sprouting through new snow.
We've had some cold air funneling in from Canada.
WBZ meteorologist Pamela Gardner.
I have to ask you, it is April. We had a very mild winter. We're now into spring. Why is this happening now?
It seems like Mother Nature is playing a joke on us.
Strong winds caused damage in New Jersey, where windows shattered and pieces of a fence went flying. Trees toppled and an empty beach house was blown over in New York. Winds there gusted up to 60 miles per hour. In February, a crane collapsed in these types of conditions, killing a person in Lower Manhattan. From the Midwest to the Northeast, more than 300,000 people woke up without power. And according to FlightAware.com, passengers flying into Newark, New Jersey were delayed more than 2 hours due to wind. And earlier today, the National Data Buoy Center reported waves as high as 20 feet off the coast of New Jersey.
Thousands of passengers and hundreds of trucks carrying fruit and vegetables to the capital were left stranded as rivers broke their banks along Peru's central highway. A lorry driver is rescued from atop his truck as a swollen river threatens to drag him to near certain death. Floods have battered Peru's coastal region, where 3/4 of the population live. Later than expected, the El Niño phenomenon has arrived with a vengeance.
In terms of climate statistics, as long as we have reliable statistics in Peru for the last 60 or 70 years or so, this El Niño is ranked number 3 in both temperature anomalies and rainfall anomalies.
In other words, weather conditions linked to this El Niño have caused the heaviest rains and hottest temperatures in 2 decades. The weather phenomenon caused by the warming of sea surface temperatures in the Pacific has also caused drought in the country's southern highlands. That will impact the livelihoods for some of Peru's poorest.
We need our authorities to put their hands to their hearts and see how we live.
Yet Peru is better prepared than in the past. An hour outside Lima, the town of Chosica readied flood defenses.
Less than a year ago, a deadly landslide tore down this mountainside, destroying everything in its path, including the homes that stood here. The people in this town say that they're more prepared to evacuate.
While some contingency plans have worked, Peru's dramatic geography has meant many have been left stranded. Peru's weather agency has put the country on alert for even more heavy rains.
Rescuers were battling on Monday to reach thousands of people stranded by floods and landslides in Pakistan and Kashmir. The worst hit area was Shanghua district in northern Pakistan, where 14 deaths were reported. Pre-monsoon rains often cause damage in rural Pakistan. But during the rainy season last summer, torrential downpours and flooding killed 81 people.
One suicide car bomb blew up in the southern metropolis of Basra. Another in the town of Mashhadiyah, north of Baghdad, the capital, targeted a convoy of the Popular Mobilization Force. That's a coalition of Shia militiamen. People wearing suicide belts blew themselves up at a military checkpoint in the north of Baghdad and in the middle of a crowd of militiamen outside a restaurant in the southern city of Nasiriyah. Another suicide car bomb blew up in the province of Al-Anbar, west of Baghdad, and an explosive device targeted government security forces in the south of Baghdad.
A joint military drill between the U.S. and the Philippines begins today and will last until next Friday, May the 15th. And the annual exercise is known as a shoulder-to-shoulder or Balikatan in Filipino. About 10,000 personnel from both countries is expected to take part. 55 military airplanes from the U.S. will also participate. The Philippines will dispatch 2 F-A-50 fighter jets, which were recently purchased from South Korea. It is the first time since 2005 that the country has fighter jets participating in the drill. And the Filipino military said the U.S. will deploy an M142 High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, or HIMARS, for the first time on Palawan Island near the disputed waters of the South China Sea. Australia will send 80 officers to take part in the drill after observing last year. Japan has been invited to observe this time around.
Terrorists have unleashed a wave of suicide attacks across Iraq, killing at least 29 people and wounding dozens. The deadliest attack hit a busy restaurant in the southern province of Dihar, where a bomber blew himself up, killing 14 people. Separately, an attacker set off his explosives-laden car in a commercial area in the oil-rich city of Basra. At least 5 people were killed and 12 more injured. Early in the day, a bomber rammed his car into a security checkpoint in Baghdad. That attack left 6 Iraqi forces dead. 4 soldiers also died in a terrorist attack on a paramilitary unit north of Baghdad. Daesh has claimed responsibility for the deadly bombings. The Takfiri terrorist group frequently carries out attacks across Iraq, targeting both civilians and security forces.
The NSA director testified to the Senate Armed Services Committee that the potential for crippling cyber attacks on the power grid and other infrastructure, as well as the destruction and manipulation of data in government computer networks, keep him up at night.
Think about the implications of that if you couldn't trust the military picture that you were looking at, you're using to base decisions on, and let alone the broader economic impacts for us as a nation.
And to the third point you just made about non-state actors using cyber as a weapon system, how grave a threat is that to us currently?
It doesn't take billions of dollars of investment. It doesn't take decades of time. Cyber is the great equalizer in some ways.
And with growing evidence that Russia was behind a crippling cyber attack on the Ukraine's power grid last year, lawmakers were told the use of cyber weapons is not a hypothetical.
Does Russia have the capability to inflict serious harm to our critical infrastructure?
Yes.
Does China have the same capability?
Some measure of the same capability, yes.
Despite an agreement between Mr. Obama and China's president last fall, Rogers testified that Beijing's attacks on American industry are not letting up.
We continue to see them engage in activity directed against U.S. companies.
The admiral who leads the U.S. Cyber Command said the Chinese appear to be stealing American secrets to give their businesses an edge.
Using that then to generate economic advantage is not something that's acceptable to the U.S.
With the recent hack of the MedStar hospital network, Rogers said the healthcare sector is increasingly a cyber target because it holds so much personal information that can be used for identity fraud.
Daesh terrorists have launched a chemical attack on a Syrian military airport in the eastern province of Deir al-Zawr. Syrian state media reported that the ISIL used mustard gas in its offensive against the army base located south of Deir al-Zawr city. There were no immediate reports of possible casualties. The Syrian army, backed by Russian airstrikes, managed to flush terrorists out of several villages near the airport last year. However, Takfiri terrorists are still in control of parts of the province that borders Iraq, where they launched chemical attacks on the northern city of Taza last month. Several people, including minors, were killed in those attacks.